In the new pictures that I put in the e-packs, I played around with my lighting so it was able to show you the texture. And the reason why I wanted to do this was because I wanted to create like a little bit of a old wall, you know, those old plaster walls that have been painted a million times and chipped, and they just slap more paint on it, and the sun's beaming in on that wall, and you can kind of see all those little crevices and different little looks that are going on in the background. So with the two different teddy bears, you can see that there's a little bit different looks going on. And so you can see some watermarks. So we're going to play with actually 3 different mediums tonight. So really this is a multi-medium design. We're going to do like a watermark type faux finish for our background. We're doing a little bit of 3D raised effect. And then we're doing some traditional one-stroke techniques to build our bear. And they're very, very simple one-stroke techniques. So, it's not going to be very difficult for you to be able to put the 2 colors together and start creating this. And as I show you, you'll see how it'll all make sense. If you've seen in the e-pack, there's a few pictures of just the head done and the body done. So we do some outlining, and you'll get lots of practice shading today and playing around with your feather brush. Okay, so now that you've got your canvas all nice and gessoed and it's all nice and dry, we're going to play with some stencils. I've got some from the Fabric Creations from Donna Dewberry that I just want to use the heart part. And yeah, I think we'll pop it up in the corner here, just a little bit on an angle. And I don't have my painter's tape handy, so I'm just going to use a little bit of Scotch tape and just hold it in place there kind of lightly. I'm not going to push it down too hard. The gesso is pretty durable compared to regular paint, so I won't pull it off. Like I said, just light touch there. So I found myself a winner's card, just the top of it from one of the gift cards I got from Christmas. I thought, that'll work to spread things out. It's a little bit bigger than the credit card. So I just folded it right over there so I can try and get most of the paste right on the edge. And we're just going to scrape it right through the stencil. And so, because it's popping up a little bit there, just got to hold it down steady and apply some of that paste in there. And try to stay more in one direction. Okay, so now that I get a better angle there, trying to stay out of the view of the camera so you guys can see what I'm doing. Okay, and just slowly work it across. You can see how it's kept popping up on me. But amazing, the stuff stays where you put it. It didn't move at all when it popped up, so I was quite impressed by that. But just kind of hold it down, and that way you don't accidentally squeegee some underneath the stencil. And just keep adding a little bit more until you feel like you got a nice smooth coverage. And just go slow right across, all in one stroke. You can see I kind of slowed down there. I made a little wobble. So I started over, trying to get that nice smooth stroke. When it's dry, I'll show you again what it looks like a little closer. And yeah, just take your time and just smooth it over. It takes a lot of playing. Like, you can go over it again and again, but as long as you're holding your stencil down. And then I just scraped up some of the excess there. And I'm kind of cheap. Might be the, my Scottish ways. Gotta put it all back in there. Alright, not wasting any. Make sure you put your lid on. Keep it nice and moist when you're not using it. And then, yeah, just pull up and hold your canvas down at the same time. And, yeah. So what I found with the board canvases, they're a lot easier to press on, and they're not going to bounce and move. So when you're playing with the wrapped canvases, if you can find yourself a book to put under your canvas, so that when you're pushing down on your canvas, it won't flex on you. So definitely the boards are easier. So it's not going to move even if you do use the wrapped canvases. It'll stay and won't crack on you. But when you're pushing down on it, I find that you just need something behind the canvas, so that way you can get a nice smooth push on your credit card, and it's got some backing to it underneath the canvas, so that you get a little bit more pressure. Right. So yeah, that's all it is. And if you feel like you did need a little bit of cleanup, you can always just grab a brush and wipe away. I didn't really need any. I'm just kind of showing you some backup if you did happen to get some underneath your stencil. And then if it's too big, then yeah, they'll come down in size. Just dampen it with a little bit of water and then clean off your canvas wherever you might have made a mistake. And that's it. And just let her dry. So I did this in the evening and I let it dry overnight. And then it's good to go, and you can paint right on top of it. And yeah, the possibilities is endless. It's so much fun with this stuff. Alrighty, so here we are the next morning. It's all nice and dry. Okay. Gonna show you that it has a little bit of a texture to it, but it's really nice and smooth. But this is kind of white, like it's an off-white and on-white, so I was trying to play around with my settings here for this little part of the video. You can really see how nice and clean those lines are with this paste. It's just wonderful. So if you're not sure what painter's tape is, definitely use this to hold your stencils down and block off any areas on the stencil that you don't want to use, to help so that the paste doesn't get in there and you'll have less cleanup. So for this design here on this particular canvas here, like I said, this is the wrapped canvas that I have out now, because I've done a couple of them, getting them ready for the course. Okay, so like I said, if you pop a book underneath while you're scraping, it won't be so flexible, and you'll be able to get a nice smooth look on your stencil. Okay, so it just depends on what kind of canvas you're using. Gotta give you food for thought for everything. Alright, and I hope you have fun with it. You can kind of see, oh, there you go, now you can kind of see. I just was flip-flopping that gesso around on this one, and playing around and getting some texture there. So I can't wait to start painting it. If you have any questions up to this spot, please let me know, and we can maybe troubleshoot you before you start doing the project. Okay? I'm loving it. So here's a little some tips and tricks on how to clean everything up, because a lot of people might go to the sink and start rinsing it off in the sink, and as you can see, I pulled off a lot off the stencil that was still really good, and you can scrape it back in the jar. But yeah, don't rinse any kind of clay mud products down the sink if you don't have to. If you have some old plumbing, it might clog things up. So yeah, and I'm not gonna waste all this good stuff. So put that right back in my jar. I just use the cardboard to brace it on so that I can get it all off. Because if I scraped it off with a towel, then the excess will go in the holes and all over my towel, and I'd never be able to get it off. So that's why I picked up the cardboard to do that. So the best way to do it is just grab a spray bottle and then just wipe it all off. I've got lots of old rags from my salon when I closed my salon and retired. For those that don't know me, I did have an injury on my left hand, so it kind of limits me on what I can do now, and I'm just grateful that I'm able to still take advantage of creating and making art and sharing all my crazy ways with you guys. Yeah, nice and clean. That was a brand new stencil. I didn't take the tape off, but I thought maybe that little extra tape will help hold things down. But so yeah, if anything's dry, just, you know, what's really good to use too if you have no nails is a bread tie or a milk tie. You know, those little square things you pull off and throw in the garbage. They're wonderful for scraping things off without damaging. And yeah, just wet down your towel. And then I try to keep the same towels for all my yucky cleaning work. And then when they get trashed, then I just throw them away. And just plain old water, H2O, folks. My old hairdressing water bottle. That thing has been thrown around, dropped. Alright. Hope you enjoy it. So if you didn't get a chance to do your pattern, you still have time to quickly get that on there. And I was trying to make sure that it was, you know, a little bit far away enough from, you know, the corner, you know, about finger length about there, right? And I'm not too worried about the floor because I'm going to show you some tricks on how to get that floor in there. Okay, so you can just put a couple ticks in there just to show the angle of what we're doing. So we don't want this to be too high on an angle because then it'll look like he's going down a hill. Okay, so just quick placement. Right. So we're going to get some colors on our palette. And I recommended what I used the first time was light flesh. If you have the regular acrylics, you don't have the multi-surface, there's a couple different colors available. There's actually, this is where I got the Cameo from, folks, it's Cameo Blush. It's a little bit more pinker than the, but you know, you can make your backgrounds a little bit different variations. It's all up to you what you like. If you do have that little more beigey color, you can always add the pink and beige together. Add a little bit of brown and white to make your beige and then put it with your pink so it really cools it down. I also used a greenscape for the bottom. Any gray will work because by the time we're finished doing our highlighting and shading on these floors, and then we're going to do like what's called a wash, like a glazing effect. Some people call it glazing, some people call it a wash. So we're going to change that floor anyways with another tone when we start playing around with our watercolor effects. Okay, so any gray will do, and if you don't have gray, just try to make a medium gray with your black and white. So it's just getting that mid-tone down. Okay. And then also we're going to need our camel. A light cool beige. Okay, so the burnt umber is a very warm brown. So this true brown is more of a cool color. Okay, so you could add a little tiny bit of gray into it to cool it down. Or if you're just making your bear a warmer color, that's fine too. You know, you can change colors, make him any color. Once you learn the technique of his fur, you can even make him blue if you wanted to. All right. So now I'm just going to get a pencil and my handy dandy ruler. Okay. And this is where we're going to help ourselves make a little bit more of a straighter line. Okay. So what I did at the top is I made a little bit of a border for, you know, the trim that goes around your floor and along your wall. So I was just trying to give a little bit of an illusion there. And then depending on what size brush are you going to be using, if you're using the small canvas that I have here, this is a 9 by 12. If you're doing the, what is it, 12 by 16, then you could use a 3/4 brush. But for this smaller canvas, I'm probably going to just use a 16 or a 12 if you have it. Okay. And what happens when you get closer and closer is your little boards are going to, you can make them a little bit bigger and bigger so that it really gives it the illusion of these ones being further away. I wasn't too particular about that, but you know, every time I recreate something, I tend to always make it better and better and look for little things. And you can always even change your angle a little bit too, because you know that back here is going to be further away and this is going to be closer together. So we can even tweak this design today even better than it was before just by, you know, making it a little bit more of an illusion. So you can use your brush as a guide and see how, you know, if we're going to do a one-stroke technique through there, that's going to be the width of our brush. Okay, so we can squeeze that in there a little bit more. But we're going to do some quicker way of doing it so it's really easy for people that aren't used to one-stroke techniques. And there is 2 ways of doing it, which I did do Blossom a little bit different. All right. So we're just going to put our lines in now and then slowly make them slightly bigger. Come through his foot and just slightly bigger. You can measure these all out if you really want to, but I just do it by eye. Okay, just not even a big difference, just very slight. Okay, and then all the way down to the corner. Oops, hit my nail. So I have 3 colors of paint to start with. The light flesh, cameo, and I used a greenscape. So first we're just going to water down that light flesh. If you don't have light flesh, you can use any pink. White it down a little bit, add a little bit of beigey kind of color in it to soften it a little bit, and create your own. We're going to be layering at least 3 different colors over this today, so and it's going to change and become unique no matter what. If you use the exact same colors as me or not, it's going to still look a little different by the time you're done, because we're going to add like more of a watercolor effect on top of it later. And watercolors are not easily to control, and it's best just to let them go and have fun with them. So just to get a good base down, we're just flip-flopping it around and just paint all the way around outside your bear. And we're going to leave some translucent areas that are a little bit more white and some have a little more coverage. And you're just getting the basic color put down on a canvas. And so I like to just add a little bit of paint at a time. But yeah, ideally is, try to just put a little at a time, and then that way if you need more, you can always put more. and then get a good coverage. And this one is a wrapped canvas, so I like to paint all the way around the sides, so then that way you can just pop it on a nail and hang it up. There is little kits that you can get for hanging picture frames that you can get at the hardware store and dollar stores that have little hooks and wire strings that you can attach to the back as well if you want to upgrade it even more. But yeah, normally I just pop them on a screw, so it has a little bit of a head. Alrighty, so we got our background all nice and done. And you don't have to be too neat about it, because we're going to be layering a lot of different colors, and the teddy bear is going to overlap your background, so you don't even have to be too worried about painting perfectly around the teddy bear. Right. So just wipe out the excess off your brush, and just a quick rinse. I didn't clean it very thoroughly. And we're going to grab some of the Cameo now, which is just like a cool color. It's not very much yellow in it. It's got a more of a gray base to it. So again, if you don't have Cameo, you can take any of your browns that you have and add a lot of white. And then if you have like a burnt umber, then it's going to be more warmer. It's going to have a lot more yellow tones in it. And so to grade that down a little bit, you can always add a little bit of blue into it, or the tiniest bit of black, just enough to dirty it a little bit. And you know, when you use opposite colors on the wheel, like red and green, if you put red and green together, you'll create a brown. So if you put a little bit of blue or green into that mixture, then you'll definitely get some cooler shades going on to take out the oranges and the yellows. So if you want a little bit more color theory and you haven't jumped on any of my practice courses, I cover a lot of color theory in all of the 5 courses, but primarily the basis and the beginning stages of color theory are in number 1. And we go through all the tricks of double loading the brush and adding 2-3 colors. So if you're not too familiar with the one-stroke technique, then I highly suggest you jump on some of my courses. And if you have any problems at all, you can feel free to contact me. And we can even meet on Zoom for some private Zoom time to troubleshoot any problem that you're having. Pick my brain a little bit. Okay, so our goal was to give it a good base, but also be able to see our lines through the teddy bear. Right? So then that way we can see where all these shadows are going to be. So just a medium gray, not too light, not too dark, because we're going to add black and white, and then that way we'll have our 3 tones. There's some tricks that we can do easily with multi-loading your brush with the black and the white, and be able to create these boards all in one stroke. But if you're not used to one stroke or having challenges keeping your gradient, then just doing it this way is kind of quicker and a lot easier too for you. So we're just going to get the base coat down, and again, you try to do it in a light enough coat that you're still seeing some of those lines through there, so then that will be able to guide you to separate the boards later. Again, don't worry about being too neat. Just get the color in there. Okay, so now we're going to add some engine red or apple red or whatever primary red that you have. And you'll see some areas of the video are regular time. I tried to keep the areas that are important slower for you to be able to watch. And any areas that are very repetitive and time consuming, I will definitely speed them up for you so that you can get through the process, stop the video, and then carry on and follow me with the rest of the process. So you can see I have these handy dandy little spritzers that I found at the dollar store. They're such a nice fine spray. And if you don't have one of them, just turn your nozzle down on your spray bottle so that you're just getting a very fine mist. So I'm trying to just keep the water in the area of the light flesh area and keep my teddy bear area and my floor area dry. And I'm just tipping my canvas around and adding a bit more water to help it flow and just feeling how the look is going. And ideally what I want to happen is to have it stay in the raised areas. So then that way it'll actually add a shadow around those areas. Just playing around. You don't have to do it too many times. I just wanted to try to add a little bit more warmth through the whole area and then bring it back. If you can see that I'm spreading it out and then I'm keep bringing it back to that hard area so that it stays darker in that area. A little bright there when I flip it up because I'm so close to the camera. Okay, so you see how I'm just guiding the color around. And you can always let it dry and add another layer if you like. You can't really blow dry watercolor effect. If you have the setting of your blow dryer too hard, it will just blow the water all over the place. So it's really just best to let it dry on its own, and that the evaporation of the water and the color molecules in the paint, that's how it starts to create that illusion and effect by the slow process of it drying. So what I tried to do with this project is to do it in an area so that I can multitask. I don't want to spend all day and days doing this. So again, like I was saying, try to keep just the top area wet and then you'll be able to move down and work on another area while that's starting to dry. As long as your table is flat and it's not running on you. If it is, then you may have to prop something up in underneath your canvas so that it sits straight, so that it's not leaking all over the place and down into the areas that you want to work on next. Okay, so you see I added just a little bit more red. And I didn't let it dry. I just kept adding the red because I wanted a soft, muted kind of color. These are old plaster walls that have been painted on a million times, and when the sun comes in and hits those walls, you see all those areas that have been patched up and repainted, and so that was the kind of effect that I was looking for. Okay. So I'm showing you what happens, see? It just kind of blows it around. So it's not really a good idea to blow dry your canvas, okay? I was just being funny there. I thought, let's show you what not to do, okay? So you see I had to just bring it all back, and there's no way of speeding up this process, okay? You use a paper towel, or if you have a sponge, you can just mop up some of those areas to try to create some white spots. Okay, so take off some of the excess. So again, if you've never played with watercolors effect, these are some of the things that can go on, and I don't always like to show you do this when things don't go as planned, or you're not sure why things are happening. I can't really show you how to get out of that problem unless it happens to me. So this is why I've decided to keep these little areas into the video so that you can see that you're not going to get into too much trouble. If you're not happy with the way you're looking, just sop it all up in your paper towel, let it dry, and do it again. Okay, learn from what happened the last time, and then just keep trying. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you'll see when watercolors dry, they're a lot lighter than what they look like right now while they're wet. Okay. So again, I wanted a very subtle look, and we are going to add a little bit more red around that heart in a little bit. We're just going to let this stage dry. Okay, so we need a little bit of white. But it's been a blast. I'm having so much fun with creating these videos. I'm hoping that you're getting something out of them, and you're getting some time away to play and escape from reality. No big deal. Just mop it up. Like I said, if you're having a hard time with it and you just want to let it dry, go have a little break or lunch or snack and come back to it, that's fine too. Okay. So you can turn your brush upside down, or you can flip your canvas upside down, and whatever's more comfortable for you. And go right around these sides. If you get to do the she teddy, which we decided to name Blossom, I like I said, I did this step upside down in that video, There's a few things I did a little differently, and I'm hoping that you're going to get something out of both of them, because I do kind of share some different tricks in Blossom. I got down to it a lot quicker in some ways, but if you're a beginner painter, you might like to do this one first, because it's a little bit more slower process building. Okay, so you can double load your brush, or you can just side load some white. I'm just trying to get that color a little bit deeper. This canvas is a little bit bigger on my table, so I apologize. I'm getting down there at the bottom. And just keep working your way down until you get to the corner. You see, I'm not too worried about my teddy. I'm going to paint over it again. Just angle your brush a little bit to be able to get in there. Try to keep your line straight. Again, in the Blossom, I do have some other tricks that I show you how to do your lines too. Okay, now for a little bit of black, or licorice. Licorice is just a real subtle black. It still looks black, but it's not as hard as the pure black. But either or will work. Okay, I'm showing you how I double loaded that. And really a lot of floating medium in your gray, so you don't even need a lot of gray. It's mostly the black that you're trying to get in there. So I'm really not going to add any more gray to my brush. It'll just be a lot of floating medium, so it'll mute that gray right out. And then you're just going to skimp right across all the top. Keep adding lots of floating medium. You're just going just underneath that white line. You can see how the black will neaten things up for you, so if you were a little wobbly, and you can be a little bit neater with your black. just neatens everything up for you. Okay, so I'm just concentrating on the one side so that I can do the sides all at the same time. And you don't even have to be that straight, because they're old boards, right? So they can be a little bit wonky here and there. Alright, so now that I got that side done, I can start concentrating on the other side. And this time I'm going to show you how I use the ruler. A little trick here for you too if you feel like you need something to help guide you. Just wipe off the edge of your ruler every time, so then that way it doesn't make a mark when you put it back down again. And hopefully your white is dry too, so when you lay it down you're not going to put your ruler in wet white paint. So you're just above it. Covering that white area that you want to protect. Okay, and just follow it through. I just wanted to pop in a little darker shadow right under his bum there, because that'll be the darkest area. And under his feet, and then the rest we'll do all with brown. Oops. I love using my fingers. Just wipe it out. So we're going to be flip-flopping some more color in there too. And really I'm going very neat because I can, I guess, because I also want to show you how to control, how to do a gradient with one side. And, but you can definitely just skimp over it a lot quicker. Okay. So if it's too much like a line, you just want to add a little bit of a gradient look to it. So add a lot more. Floating medium 2 is black now. And then you can go in and soften underneath each one. Add just a little bit of darkness here and there where you think that there might be shadows. And then you can always go in and fix up anything you don't like and just keep playing with it until you're happy. I wanted to add in a little bit of a border there, a little extra little spot just to make it look like the trim that you have against the wall that lines against the floor. You guys are wondering why I'm wearing my brace today. I have good days and bad days, I guess, and depending on the humidity of the weather and raining and cold, my thumb acts up on me. I have two joints that are blown in the base of my thumb. So thank God it's my left hand and I'm right-handed that I can still paint and create and share all my wacky ways with you guys. And I don't even want to hold on to this side of the canvas. Sometimes it's hard for me just to hold on to my project. But when I create, it takes me away from all my pains. And I'm enjoying the process and get lost in my art. Oh, my head's in the way. Sorry, folks. So I'm just kind of adding a little bit more brightness in there. And because I'm doing these pre-recorded now, I'm finding myself getting a lot more fussier and showing you all the little extra details that I don't always get a chance to show you during the live events. So you want to see those three colors, like a gray, the black, and the white. And then skimping in some little imperfections in the wood here and there, and depth and darkness in places. And I'll show you with the feather brush how we can put the grain in. Just keep playing until you're happy with it. Okay, lots of floating medium. It was too dark. You can see how I just clean things up and feather them out. And just step away a little bit and come back and look at it. And sometimes we look at it too long. We don't see where the shadow should be, so step back and take a look at it. And look at it from a little bit of 3 feet back and squint your eye a little bit. So you can see the background of the pink is pretty dry by now. So if you feel like you want to add a little bit more engine red and play around with more layers of watercolor, you can do that. But I am going to show you how to detail this heart a little bit more. Okay, you can see it's all dry. So I try to work a little bit at the top and then let that dry, work at the bottom, let that dry, and then I'll move back to the top again. And that way you can keep moving on. So I just took a little tiny bit white on my paper towel. I'm just speckling in some white. Just to make those raised areas stand out a little bit more. A mottled look. So especially if you're feeling like you don't have enough white areas, you can always sponge a little bit of white back in. So just make sure your white is good and dry before you do any more watercolor effect on it. I just want the sides to match too, so don't forget them. Just softening it out. Now I can speckle in a little tiny bit of red in there. Just a very soft, subtle, speckled look. Now I'm showing you how to put some of those little grains in with the homemade feather brush. Just a skimp. Make sure you have lots of floating medium in there so it slides. And you're just using the very edges of your brush. Lots of little detailers. Gives you some randomness. Some are going to be a little bit heavier. Definitely you want the front to be a little heavier than the back. And bigger strokes so that it looks like the wood is getting smaller as it goes into the dark in the background. So I'm just doing like little round U strokes to get them to look like some little knots here and there. So I go in one direction and then I go the other direction on top of it. A little bit heavier there in the center. Those are just simple little knots. I actually did put a little more highlight on the floor in the blossom. As you can see, very translucent, just a very little bit of red on the edge. And then now we're going to just go around that heart with a little bit of a glazing effect and help it pop out a little bit more. So if you don't have paste and you don't have a raised area in your project like this, you can always just paint in your own heart and speckle it a little bit around it the same way. And just draw it in with a pencil and to guide you, and do a little bit of faux finishing, and it'll pop out quite nicely, very similar. You may not have the little scrolls on the side, but maybe you can get creative in other ways to add some scrolls. Okay, so just very subtle gradient. I still wanted lots of light in there. Okay, so now I'm just dry brushing across the raised areas. A wash of that engine red and lots of floating medium. Oops. Must have hit my black somehow. That's okay, just give it that little extra dirty look. Okay, so remember that if you want that little extra dirty look, just accidentally hit your black. Okay? And then I just use the sponge to soften things out and dampen things a little bit to mute them in. You can always use berry wine. It would be nice too, or cherry red. There's a cherry red out there too. Spritz it a bit to give it that watercolor again. Hey, so you can see I started a little bit there and forgot to turn the camera on, folks. Sorry about that. But it's basically just side loading one color and lots of forward floating medium, and now we're going to go around all those little lines that you can still see with your pencil and all around the edge of the outside of our teddy bear. And you can see most of my background is dry. It's just on top of the heart that's still a little bit wet. And I'm just going to leave that alone and let it do its thing. Just try to keep my canvas flat now so it doesn't pool over. Just go slowly, blending it out. I use my fingers a lot, as you guys can see, or you can just use a sponge. And if you don't want to get paint all over your hands, then you can wear gloves if you like, but it washes off really easy. Just smudge that in here and there. You don't want it to be neat. Okay, we're going to be adding some more of this brown into our walls as well to really add some more aging effect. So just kind of wish-washy around. Oh, there you go again, hitting the black. But you know what? That's okay. Like, I'm not worrying about it too much because it's just giving it that dirty kind of look that I'm looking for. So, in my opinion, this is a great beginner project. Okay. Trying to soften that out, add more floating medium, because you don't want a double line around there. Okay, so that's what I'm just trying to soften out, is that edge so it's not a line. It's almost like a water effect too that you're doing all the way around the outside. So you can see if it's not totally dry, you can still just add more floating medium and thin anything out that is too hard. And then I'm going to do all across the top of my wallboard. Okay, so you can see it's just a messy kind of fade gradient. Okay, so now I'm just going to add a little bit of that wash into the background now. Try to make the corners a little bit darker. Remember to go over the edge on your canvas too, so it has a little bit of a brown wash on the edges too. Very, very light wash. Put it in there, dab it off. And then now I'm just doing that same technique again with a little bit of, there's hardly anything in my brush, just mostly floating medium and just the tiniest bit of brown on the corner. You can just add blobs of water in with your brush. So now we're going to do a wash, which I call, many people call a glazing effect. And we're going to just wash that brown right over everything on our floorboards. Just dirty it up a little bit. And you'll see how that brown hits the highlighted areas. Although the blossom is very similar, I'm sure many of you can probably figure her out just by doing this project. But if you're having problems or you want just to see it all again in a different way, I do go through her a little bit differently and a little bit more tricks on how to adjust your boards. You can definitely repaint an area and adjust it and move it, and so I do spend a bit of time differently on that project than I do on this one. I hope that you'll get something out of both of them. And I did recreate a new pattern for her as well. And so you just want that tiny bit of space underneath the chin. But it's going to be darker there, so it's okay to be a little tiny darker there. And you don't have to be so fussy, because we are going to go over this with the feather brush, and you'll see it in my finished picture here in the corner. You're not even going to see a lot of these, lines. So it's just there to guide you. And once we start putting the fur on with the feather brush, you're going to start losing your pencil marks. So this is just a great way to go all the way around all your penciled areas. And then that way you won't lose focus of where all the fur is supposed to go. Okay. And then when you're skimping over with your fur, you still have an opportunity to take advantage of these shadows and leave some of it in there. You don't want to paint over all these shadows. Okay. But I show you lots of tricks on how to get them back in there and play with the fur in the next step. Okay, so this gives you lots of practice on how to do some shading work with just loading one color. I've already got my background in there. Okay, so just go, you can do the little hands that way if you want, but I ended up changing it and just making it fluffy all the way down to the bottom. So you want to shade both sides of your line. Okay, so you're going to have a shadow on the arm, and then you're going to have a shadow on the belly. So you're just going to go all the way around the whole design and just put in some rough placements. Of where your shadows are going to be. And you don't have to worry about the paw doing a double fade in that area, because we are going to do a little bit of pouncing too to get some different texture in there. But this is a lot faster to get the shading in there and more accurate and than doing it all pouncing. I'm showing you how I'm getting a little fussy here. And so it's on the outside of that circle, keeping the hard line inside the foot for now. Okay. Really test your ability to get in that there a little tightly and still have some light showing in there. And then just on the outside of the cheek. That ear's tucked behind the face. Forgot to do a little nosy part here. And you're just going to shade on both sides. I just added floating medium to it to thin it out. If you don't have any floating medium, then you could put a little bit of water in a saucer, so then that way you can just tip the corner of your brush just gently in the top of that little bit of a water, and it'll work too. But the floating medium has a little bit more slip to it, and it's actually what is inside the paint too, so it'll still won't take the quality of the paint away. So I find you get a nicer blending with a floating medium. Okay, so just go all the way around the bottom of his tie. And a little bit around all the top of his head. You see how I just flip-flop that in there? Because we're not going to see it, alright? So don't worry too much. Just get that placement in there. Like you're drawing with a paintbrush now. And sometimes I'll do an area if I'm afraid I'm going to wreck that top area of his arm. You see how I let that dry a little bit, and then I went back in and did the bottom areas. So then that way you won't hit it with your brush while it's wet. And then you can shadow on the inside of that as well. Okay, so you see how that makes it a little bit more finished looking now, having the double shading. And you could just pounce this little guy and make him all fuzzy that way if you don't have a feather brush, or you didn't get a chance to see my hack that I have, that you can make a feather brush out of any old brush. Just with a pair of sharp scissors. And I'll show you a little bit more about my feather brush in the blossom as well. I try not to repeat myself too much, so then those of you that are taking more than one course from me, you're going to keep learning new stuff. Okay, so just keep playing around with all your shading until you got it all done. Okay, a little bit underneath his chin there. You can see already he's starting to take shape. Right, so you see how it was easy for me to pop that in there after that area was dry, and then I can always add a little bit more depth if I feel like it's not shaded enough. So don't be afraid just to do a little bit at a time and step back and take a look and add more as you need it. Okay, so now we're just going to add a little bit of white in there now, and I'll show you how I added a little bit more highlight and shading at the same time here, just to pop that foot. The velvet part of his foot is going to be a little different texture like his nose is, right? So just to brighten things up a bit, I wanted to put a little bit of a white base coat in there with the shading. And then, like I said, you're not going to see a lot of this. We're going to pounce over it, but it's a great opportunity to really practice your technique. Just keep going over it until you're happy. That way it starts to introduce a little bit different color on the feet and the nose. And so you can see now that I added some white into my brush, it's changing the tone a little bit. So I did add a bit more of that cameo on my brush just so that I can try to stay on the same tone. But again, it's not a big deal that you're seeing a tiny bit whiter color there. It makes it stand out a little bit more. So I took advantage of it and just tried to blend it in a little bit. Okay, so once you get all this done, then you'll be ready to start putting some color in the ribbon, and we'll finish the fur and all the little finishing details. Get them started there. Okay, so I got the tie done, and I just use like a teal color. Okay, so you just paint that in there just to give it the base coat. Okay, pretty simple. Alright, so then we're going to get some real brown back out. and we're going to just pounce all around the edges. Okay. And like I said, you could do that too if you really want to, instead of doing all the side loading. But now I'm just doing certain areas a little bit that, maybe I just want a little bit more fuzziness looking. You can just pop that in quickly with a scruffy brush, and just a small one, a quarter size. See, I'm just doing certain areas. And you still want to leave a little bit of cheek area there, so just a little bit, although that is your darker side. I'm just kind of making a little bit more fuzziness around the eyes. And a little darker underneath his neck. And both sides of the line, especially under the arms. And then just a little bit on the outside of the line at the top, just to start giving him a fuzzy look. I'm trying to make his leg look a little darker than his foot, so it looks like it's standing out. It's just a little bit trickier trying to shade in this little area. Just try just through the edges. And now I'm just pouncing in a little tiny bit around there. Just in the back area that looks further away. Trying to get a real feel of where the shadows are and placement of the further away areas. Just dirty up his cheeks a little bit. And now we're just going to put in a little bit of black to get his eyes started. I was having some lighting issues there, and I tried to adjust it, but I think I made it a little too dark in this area, but I fixed it up, I think, in the next little section. I can't really do a second take on some things when you're painting live. It all depends on if I get the sunshine coming in my room or not. So now we got into the evening where I'm painting, so I had to play with my lighting. Just dabbing in a little bit of black back in there again. But we'll probably touch that up again a little bit at the end if it needs it. So now I'm going to introduce cinnamon into the teddy bear, give it a little bit more warmth. And I've got some marigold yellow. And I'm just going to go inside that area where I pounced with the cinnamon now. Just adding a little bit more dark brown in that area first. And I like to have all the colors in my brush, so I try to side load my scruffy with a little bit of that dark brown and then half with the cinnamon, and then that'll slowly start to create a gradient with that little bit lighter version of a brown. And then every time I need paint now, I'll just keep dipping into the cinnamon, and then it'll slowly get a little bit lighter and lighter as I keep playing around with moving the gradient out. Okay, so I just took out a lot of that brown, but I didn't clean my brush. I just picking up some brighter color. Oh, silly. You can keep playing with the pouncer and finish your teddy bear that way too and give him another look. It really all depends on your feel of the day and what you're creating and how much time do you want to put into it. If you're doing something just quick on a little birthday card and you want to plop in a quick little teddy bear, you can definitely do it all pouncing like this. Rolling around very lightly. Having fun yet? I hope you are. Get into your zone. So I've got the same similar colors I've been using so far, and I also have another one that we're going to introduce, a sunflower yellow. Okay, if you don't have the sunflower yellow, you can always just mix any yellow with some white to get like a buttercup type yellow, like a little bit of a pastel yellow. It's fairly neutral. It's not too warm. It's not too gray. You can see that the camel is more of a cool tone still compared to the sunflower, so they'll pop out nicely together. Okay, so we're just introducing a little bit more of the brighter yellow, and we're just using our feather brush like a pouncer now, just to kind of pop in just a little bit more of another dimension into your pounced areas. Again, the more we slowly build up your gradient, the more natural it's going to look. So now I'm just introducing a little bit more of the lighter color a bit, like a wash more. Okay, lots of floating medium. Okay, trying to get that perfect amount on my brush so I can get more of a streaky look now. And if you do just little short little furs, it'll look like they have shorter hairs. And the blossom, I went just a little bit longer stroke to give her a longer fur look. So it all depends on what style that you do. How long you make your strokes will give it that look, and you're going to layer it starting all the way around the outside of the head and work your way in slowly towards the nose. And to get fussy with this project, it really does look best when you layer those dimensions slowly. Okay? So going in with the darker yellows, and then going back in with your cinnamon and your browns when you need it a little bit. You'll see that sometimes I need to add that depth back in there a little bit. I'll pounce in with some darker colors, and to try to keep my shadowing where it's supposed to be. Okay, so I'm just slowly going in there and starting to do some different colors. Okay, so you can do some light, and then you can feather some dark right on top of the light, and then go back in and put light on top of that again, and it really adds for the layers to build up. Start to see a little bit of fuzziness happening now, right? So I just want to introduce a little bit of that dark, and then I put the light right over it. And slowly work your way down. See how it gets that effect of fuzziness over? And I just want to put a little bit more dark in there. So sometimes we have to put dark in to make the highlights pop out more. So I'm just leaving that darker color so I can go back over it a little bit more wispier and smaller strokes over it later. And as you're getting down the cheeks, you're slowly changing your direction to 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and then down 6 o'clock, you know, all the way around the face. And if you skimp little areas here and there, you'll still see your undertones of your pouncing. And as you get closer to his eyes, you're going to get a little bit lighter and brighter. And we can pop in some more highlights later with some white, and you'll see how that defines the 3D look a little bit more. You can go over his eyes just slightly a little bit, because if you have a real teddy bear in your hand to look at as a guide, you'll see some of the fuzziness does pop up over his little glass eyes, or plastic eyes. So, just adding a little bit more dark back in there again. Sometimes you have to let it dry and see how it looks and then go over it. Going into the temple area a little bit more so that his cheeks pop out more, right? So if he's looking too round, just kind of give him a little bit more of a temple look. And you can see how I'm just kind of flicking in a little bit more dark to keep that dark there. Blend it in. And sometimes we do lose that shading that you put in the beginning, but you know, like I said, it keeps you focused. Try and put a little shadow in there so then I can give him a little bit more of an eyebrow look. So you can see how I just baby stepped it, right? So yes, you may be going over certain areas again and again, but this is how I layered them and created them. The original, very first one. So of course I come up with some tips and tricks how to get through it a little bit quicker as I was playing. Double load your fan brush too, that helps you, give you some dark strokes in there at the same time as your lighter strokes. Keep it defined so it doesn't get all muddy. His ears started to dry, so I was able to go over it again and add those little wisps over into the dark. So if you're doing this very thin, it should be drying pretty quickly so that you'll be able to keep moving on and then just come back when it's dry and pop a little bit more over it. A little too dark. Wipe her out. Right? Very easy to erase what you don't like. And so sometimes I just double loaded the cinnamon mostly with the lighter yellow and stay away from too dark of a blend. You can see around the foot now, you can see a lot of the cinnamon and the sunflower in there. And you have the light on the top and the darker on the bottom, and you follow it behind, and then your lighter strokes will sit on top of your darker strokes. And they're very, very tiny little strokes around the pads of the feet. And just stippling it in there just to blend it a little bit more. So you want to do like at least 2 layers on the feet. So you're going to work just around the outside first, and then you're going to work your way towards the center in a tighter little area like you did the face, but just all around the pad of his feet. So we're going to let that first layer dry, and then we can start working all the way around all the edges of his body. And you can see I was still not sure how I was going to do his paws at the bottom. But as I kept playing, I just started really liking the way it was looking, and I just decided to make it like fuzzy on the ends. I just got a little bit too tricky, especially with the one paw and the one hand, because it's supposed to tuck behind, right? And then the other one is sitting kind of on top, and then to get those shadows behind the foot, you know, it was starting to get a little bit too advanced techniques, and I was trying to keep it very simple for myself as well, and to get that look quickly as possible. But as you see, I love to play, and I keep playing, and I play, and I play, and I play. So hence I put it on fast forward for you. You can clearly see, you know, me building it up slowly, adjusting areas if I feel like I put too much and I needed to put some shadows back in, and just keep playing with it until you're happy. Maybe this is a good chance for you to go and take a quick picture, a peek at the picture in the e-pack if you want to know what it's looking like at this stage. Because I was doing this live, just playing in my own time, and I was was able just to shut it all off and do this voiceover for you in time lapse, so that I can get to the point quicker for you. So you can see now that the nose is starting to get really fuzzy with a more of a dabbing. Okay, so you're just going to use the scruffy in the nose, okay, and play with your colors. Add a little bit of warmth, you know, shadow, just with the cinnamon. And I can touch just the tiniest a bit of brown, so it's just wet on wet type technique, so then it's blending for you. If you feel like you put too much light, then just pop a little bit more dark in there, and then put the light right over the dark again, and not so heavy. Very, very light pounces. You're not punching the canvas with this technique. It's just a very light tappy motion. Okay, so I'm trying to introduce a little darker color around the edge. Just him making a jaggedy, not in a straight line, just up and down and around, and just want to move that lightness up just a little bit more. I'm using my favorite tool again, my fingers. Okay, so you can see how I just brought that back up a little bit higher to make that a little bit bigger. When you pounce the light over the dark, it'll give you more of a softer blend. Okay, so back with our feather brush again. Start doing that second layer. So you see, sometimes I do push it up, but to get that wispy stroke, it's better to go down, and then you can get a little bit longer of a wisp with it. So I'm just doing some jaggedy kind of motions that way. You see how I turn my brush after. And come towards me is the easier way to do that stroke. So if there's any areas that are looking too muddy, you can just, once it's dry, it's very easy to put a little bit of a wash tone back in there. Almost like you're glazing. So now I'm adding a little tiny bit of white in with my sunflower, so I can just brighten up just every once in a while. So you're really not going over everything again. You're missing areas, and you're just going up smaller into the tip of that wisp so that you can just highlight the very edges. Okay. Trying to get that dimension back in there. And trying to stay away from your dark areas, okay? trying to keep my head out of the camera. I was trying to get a good angle, so you have to kind of twist yourself up a little bit so you can get in there, so you can really see where your starting point is. And like I'm going warp speed here, so, but just be really focused on where you're putting your start, and then flick out. You can still see that I'm attempting to do that little layer under there. Which I'm glad it's in there, so I like to give you guys choices, right? So if you feel like you want to do is pause like that and leave them and have a little bit more featherness come over it so you see that under little spot. But like I said, once I started going, I just ended up, his feet and his hand was blending into each other. So a little bit more jaggedy coming towards you, a little shorter strokes. Okay, so a lot of these are all flicked up. But then once in a while you'll see me how I flick it out to get those wisps to stand out. And make sure you double load your brush so that you're still keeping some depth in there. And I want to make sure that outer layer is the way I want it before I start adding a second layer. Okay, so you can really see the double loading there at the bottom of his foot. That's what you want. You want to be able to see that little bit of third color, and then you can go over it again just really, really lightly. Same as I did on the top of the head, just trying to introduce that little bit of a darker color back in there. Every once in a while. Small little jaggedy motions. Okay, now I'm trying to get into that second layer now. And try to go in different directions so then that way they stand out. So if you're flicking up and to the right, try to flick a little bit more to the left on the second layer so then they kind of look unique on top of each other. A little more depth in there. Sometimes I go in and pop in just a little bit of darkness here and there before I do my final shadings or highlighting. Just where I feel like I'm missing. And pop that ribbon so it looks like it's popped up on top of the fur. That's all around the outside, around the back. Right behind his nose. See how that's popping his nose forward now? This is getting close to the decision time where I started going, I gotta do something with these paws. Alright, a little bit of real time for you, because if you're not able to see, because I'm moving so fast, how I'm doing these little strokes, I slowed things down for you in this area, because I'm getting more to the end of perfecting my little furs where I want them. So you see how I'm just touching just the edges of some of those areas, so I'm still seeing my tones in there. Just the tops or in the middle of a furry area. I'm trying to get close for you here. I think I'm gonna have to hold it up even for my own self too. So you see just the very tips. It's just like a dirty white. It still has that tiniest little bit of yellow. And when it starts to get too white, then I'll add a little bit more marigold to it and soften things down a bit. Just the bottom edge, a little tiny bit under the, just the very bottom edge. See how I changed directions? I went up and then I went down, and that gives it a little bit more uniqueness. Okay, a little flick up, a little flick down. Separates things a little bit. Just very little bit on my brush. Try to get a little bit of a gradient going on my brush again, just the depth around the nose a bit more again. I'm just using the corner of the dark side. Even though I double loaded my brush, I'm still just using the dark side just to try to get that in there ever so lightly. And then now I'm going over it with my other corner. Okay, so we can see as I can move down, the light is sitting on top of the dark. Okay, not too hard, just very jabbedy, little tiny strokes. Start at the top and work your way down. I'm just trying to blend out that line look. I like that last little stroke I did there, just to flick up a part of his cheek. So you'll see areas that you really like and just try to focus to emphasize them a bit more or leave them alone when you're happy. It's a balance of finding out, you know, when should I stop? Where should I add more? You can see how I really get fussy. Trying to emphasize these eyes. And you notice that one side of my homemade scruffy has a built-in detailer in it. So you'll see how that comes to my advantage here. I'm always flicking my highlight on the detailer side. Went off the camera again. Because I have it up so close view for you guys right now. Trying to show you, but yeah, so I just kept flicking around everywhere on his body. And then also you can dab just a tiny little bit of highlight now in some areas here and there with your whiter blend. Just to kind of just stipple it a little bit more. There's nothing on the dark side, it's just mostly paint on the white. You're starting to see it come together now. Try to do like a double layer now around his ear. You see me playing a little bit back and forth, trying to get that look that I'm looking for. Especially in small little areas, it's trickier to get in there, so just slowly get in there. Now I'm just trying to make some of the little furs a little bit longer looking. Okay, if it's giving you too much of a powdered look, try to add a little bit more floating medium in there so you get that streaky look. So we don't want to do too much on top of his tie because we're going to do some highlights and shading on his tie still, and then we're going to pop in the last little bit of fur on top of the tie after, so then that way we can finish all the finishing little details around his tie after. Alrighty, so yeah, just keep working around your bear until you're happy. You can see how I'm slowly making that call to make his hands all going back and forth in my blossom. I don't know if I'm doing he's or she's anymore. Okay, so whatever I had on my brush, I'm just streaking in on the tie, using that same whatever I had for the fur. So that's where you're going to see that tiny little bit of gold in the tie. Okay, and that way it kind of reflects off the color of the bear, and it ties it in nicely. So you're just doing it very, very lightly in the middle of the tie. Just highlight it a little bit, and so I put a little stronger side to it, and then just streaky little highlights here and there. I'm going to just fix his eye. So yeah, just kind of defining that area a little bit. So if I want to do any last little highlight little areas, I want to just make sure that all these little last bits are looking the way they're supposed to. And then I can always feather a tiny little bit of fur. But yeah, it was best to leave your tie to dry. And then now it's a little drier, so I can go in and add some shadowing around the edges. So you don't have to worry about putting that extra loop in there if you don't want to. But it's all around the outside first. And underneath the chin, and kind of go jaggedy a little bit. So it kind of blends a little bit with your fur. And just kind of blend that out so that it's not a hard line. I'm just using my floating medium corner. And then you can go just slowly to the other side, and it'll build that little bit of a loop in there for you. And then I turn my brush. I'm just gonna put some shading behind that little knot in the middle. Okay. It's still on the ribbon part, not on the knot. So I need to reverse that area, and then just slowly, just kind of jaggedy, kind of putting in some depth into the ribbon. And then it's also like doing a wash over the white, so it's adding a little bit of softness in that white highlight that you put. Okay, like a wash. Or a glazing effect, as some people call it. Okay, so I decided to just leave the one side like that. And just adding like a little bit of a wash of color now. Very, very watery. A little bit stronger color there again, just underneath the knot will help to stand that out. And then the same effect, just kind of dark all around the outside, and then just so now you're seeing just a little bit of white, just to brighten things up a little bit. And I actually put the highlight strong line on the right hand side now. Okay, so I'm just washing in that just a little bit of light dirty white and blue was in my brush, just to kind of highlight that up just a tiny bit more. So I have still my gradient of the Parisian blue on the corner, but I just put a tiniest amount of white. Very light touches. more jaggedy, just a little bit more white. And that softens that up. So now I'm just making a very subtle, lighter blue version. So it's still fairly dark, but just the smallest amount of white in there. Okay, and I'm just going to put in a little half circle and try to highlight my eyes a little bit with the dark blue. And then I'm going to tip my brush with the smallest amount of white and go in there wet on wet, so that you get that little smear of white and blue. Okay, and I'm just using the corner of my flat brush. If you want to use a detailer brush to do this, you can do that too. Okay, just want that little second little line in there. And then I did take my detailer and add just the smallest little dot to the right side later. I still wanted to do that same effect for the nose. Again, I just popped in that little bit of a blue first, and then took advantage of the wet on wet and just popped a little tiny shine line in there, so it's not white, it's like just a little brighter. Okay. Just a little triangle type. And it's too light, and I'm just trying to darken the underside of that little highlight a little bit more, just with the blend that we made with the Parisian blue. Okay, so we'll let that dry. And while we finish the eyes, your ribbon should be dry. And now we can go in and just add a little bit more of a wash into our background. And just here and there dabbing some color on there, and then getting my spray bottle, and it was empty, so I had to go and get my water bottle. That's the only bad thing about those little misters. They do run out of water quick, but they're great for small projects. And so I'm just using my brush to guide the color around a little bit and keeping it just in certain areas. And then if it's too heavy going into my bear, I try to sop up any big dabs of color, water that are happening too close to my teddy bear. So now I want this to run into my heart a little bit, and that'll add more shading around the little scroll areas. And really start to give it that antique-y kind of look. A little more darker there, trying to add some depth behind the teddy bear. It's looking nice with the pink and chocolate kind of look. Okay, so I'm really liking these lines that are happening now, so I don't want to move my canvas too much, because you have some dry areas on your canvas, and those wet areas are going to pool like that and dry. Okay, so we want to keep that effect. So you're not soaking your whole canvas, you're just here and there. That area is still bugging me, so I'm still trying to add a little bit more depth there. And you can see a little bit of my gesso lines in there. That's the one I was playing with, the checkerboard. But then I changed it after, but some areas were already dry. Oh, something happened there. Got some white on there somehow, so I'm just dampening it, and good old nails, they work. They say they're jewels, not tools, but, you know, sometimes that helps to have nails. Okay, so I'm just trying to take off that paint there that I accidentally touched, so I'm scraping it off. And because the base coat is so good and dry, and I was able to get the paint off without taking my underlayer off. And so now I'm just going to go in and try to make that fur look like it's kind of fuzzy over the tie. And any little last minute highlights I felt like it needed. And let me know what was your favorite part of this project. And let me know if you're struggling in any areas. You can always message me over through Facebook or email me. And send me pictures of your work and the progress if you need to. And having fun with this fuzzy little bear. As you can see, I gave up on the fur on the hands now. And make it your own, so whatever you like. There's a little area of something dry and dark there, so I was just trying to pick that out. Okay, so you can just let that dry now. It looks too much like a line there, so I was trying to mute it and make it more mottled looking. I got my striper brush there. Guess what I'm gonna do? The final touches. 2020. Mandy's Creative Touch. I made it a little bit too fat, so I just kind of erased the top of my T. Alright, that's it, folks. Thank you so much for painting with me. I look so forward to meeting you again in the next paint project.